Salwete, lesson 11. We've skipped over some lines, got them summarized here in your packet. We left the Trojans when they were decorating the city and bringing the horse in. They divided the walls. They had to make a breach in the walls to get the horse into the city, and now night falls, and the part we're skipping over is while the Trojans sleep, the Greeks return from Tenedos, enter the city through the breach made by the Trojans to introduce the horse. Sinon, the lying Greek, opens the fastenings of the horse, releasing the Greek warriors who open the gates of Troy and join their forces with the troops from the ships and proceed to lay waste the city with fire and sword. And we are going to pick up the action now as Aeneas wakes from his sleep and beholds before him the ghost of Hector, the great Trojan warrior. So let's do that next. Remember that our narrator is still Aeneas. Throughout books 2 and 3, our narrator is Aeneas. So he's narrating the story now. He's going to tell about his experience of seeing Hector. Tempus erat, quo prima quies mortalibus aegris incipit, et dono divum gratissima serpit. It was, erat, the tempus, the time, quo, in which, is ablative, in which, prima quies, first, this is quiet, or first sleep, incipit, begins, mortalibus aegris, and this is dative for mortal sick ones, or, wretched mortals. Aeger is literally sick, for sick mortals, weak mortals, idea. It was the time in which the first quiet begins, or the first sleep begins, for wretched or sick, weak mortals. Et dono divum gratissima serpit, and it creeps. Think of like a serpens, serpit. It crawls. Gratissima, very pleasingly, very pleasantly. Gratus, gratissima. Dono divum, and this is a dative as a gift. Divum, of the gods. And that's not divum, but divorum, of the divine ones. Okay, as a gift of the gods. So one more time on that. It was the time in which the first sleep begins for weak mortals, and in which it creeps very pleasingly as a gift from the gods. Or of the gods, sorry. In somnis ecantocolos maestissimos Hector visus adesse mihi largosque fundere fletus, raptatus bigis ut quondaterque cruento, purvere perque pedes trajectus lora tu mentes. Some great alliteration in here, the P's, and lots of elisions. You might have noticed some of the elisions. Antokolos. In my sleep, or in my dreams, insomnis, those are ablatives, right? Ablative of place where. In my dreams, eke, behold. Ante okolos, before, these are okolos meios, right? Before my eyes. Maestissimus Hector, very sorrowful, mournful, or gloomy Hector. Maestissimus Hector, visus adesse. This is visus est, seemed. When video, the verb I see, is in the passive, visus est, we say seemed a lot of times when it's in the passive. So when it's videor passive, we say seemed. He is seen, you could say also, but seemed probably sounds a little better. So let's do that one more time. In my sleep, behold, before my eyes, very gloomy Hector seemed mihi, to me, dative, right? Seemed to me, adesse, to be present. So we have another verb there, complementary infinitive with visus est, and this is from ad sum, adesse, it's the infinitive, right? Present infinitive. He seemed to me to be present, and he seemed to effundere, to pour out. Largos flatus, abundant tears. Let's move on to this next part here. Raptatus bigis ut quondam aterque cruento pulvere. Oh, I guess this would be raptatus bigis ut quondaterque cruento pulvere. Missed the elision there. Raptatus. He was snatched up. You got to put in an est. And you have as once he was snatched up. This modifies Hector, but when you put this with the est, it's a verb. It's perfect passive, using the perfect passive participle. As he once was snatched up, and how was he snatched up? The ablative tells us, bigis, by the two-horse chariot. If you notice in the vocabulary, bigai is plural in form, so this is a plural ablative, bigis, as he once was snatched up by the two-horse chariot. And that means the two-horse chariot of Achilles when he dragged him around the walls of Troy. So we're seeing the Hector post being dragged around the walls of Troy. That's why he doesn't look so good. And ater cruento pulvere, and he was ater, black. And how is he black? Cruento pulvere, with bloody dust, because of all the dust that he picked up from his wounds, around, getting dragged around. He's black with bloody dust. And black, anytime black is used, we had it with black venom. Remember when the snakes were eating Laocoon? It really has the association of death. And Hector is dead. This is his ghost. So as once he was snatched up by the two-horse chariot and was black with bloody dust. Perque pedes trajectus lora tu mentes. So trajectus also modifies Hector. We've got a lot of different things that are modifying Hector here. He was raptatus, snatched up. He was ater, black. He was pierced. And he's also maestissimus, very gloomy. And he was seen by Aeneas, or he seemed to Aeneas to be present. So all those go with Hector. He was pierced. Now, lora, you have right here. This is an accusative, but it's functioning, if you look at far, as an ablative. It really is the direct object of trajectus. But if trajectus is used in a middle voice, and that's a little confusing sometimes. Usually Latin sticks to active and passive, but in Greek there's a middle voice. And so sometimes the poets, because they know Greek well, and a lot of educated Romans do, they use some Greek grammar that's superimposed a little bit on Latin. So he's using trajectus in a middle sense here. And I would read up on this use in far. It's in the appendix 309 if you look at his notes. Appendix 309. And what using the middle participle enables the poets to do, the Latin poets, is then to have their participles take objects. It doesn't really translate that smoothly into English, so I'll use Farr's notes. He says he would translate this part as pierced with a thong, and by thong it means a a leather strap, okay, and this is plural too, with thongs or with leather straps. These are the straps that Achilles used to tie him to the chariot. Pierced with straps. Now I know it's not really ablative, but we're as far as translating it, in effect like an ablative. And through his pedes tumentes, through his swollen feet. I'll use another edition I have here. This is Knapp, Knapp, his edition of the Aeneid. And he translates this part as his swollen feet pierced through and through with thongs. He says it would have been easier or simpler for Vergil to have said trajectus pedes loris, where we're using loris as an ablative. But he doesn't do that because of whatever reason. He's fitting it into poetry or wants to say it differently. So this is an unconventional way of how we would usually say this in Latin. Pierced with a thong through his swollen feet. Knapp also makes the observation that because his feet were swollen, perhaps he was dragged while he was still living, because if he had been dead, then his feet wouldn't have swollen. So it's really makes the Greeks look very barbaric to do these kind of things, and Vergil's not very kind to the Greeks in portraying them as being very civilized. So let's do that whole part one more time, okay? It was the time in which the first quiet begins for sick mortals, and this first quiet creeps in very graciously, very pleasingly, as a gift of the gods. The whole city is sleeping because they have partied and they don't know the danger that's coming now. In my sleep, behold, before my eyes, very gloomy Hector seemed to me to be present, and to pour copious tears. And flatus, by the way, check it in the vocabulary. It's a fourth declension. That's why it looks singular, but it has a use, and in fourth declension, us is plural also. He seemed to me to be present and to pour forth abundant tears. As once he was snatched up by the two-horse chariot. He appeared, visus est, as once he was snatched up by the two-horse chariot, and he was black with bloody dust and pierced with a thong through his swollen feet.